speakers. The first speaker is Stephanie Harlan, who is the Vice Mayor of Santa Cruz.
Capitola.
And then we will, Capitola. Vice Mayor of Capitola. Okay. And then we are going to have Cynthia Mathews, the Mayor of Santa Cruz. And Stephanie has a long track record, and she has demonstrated stamina, and so has Cynthia. The way we're going to do this is Stephanie is going to speak first, and then Cynthia, and then we're going to take some questions, and we'll start the business meeting at 11:10 approximately. And so I will turn this over right now to Stephanie.
Thank you very much. Really happy to be here with you today. We're just going to both talk for a little while and then want you to ask questions, want to know what you want to know about us that you haven't had a chance to learn or to ask at some other time. I'll just give you a little background. I was born in Alameda, and luckily my family, my parents never were into role models, and that's a girl thing or that's a guy thing. And so I grew up pretty free to explore and do whatever I wanted to do, and which was very, very interesting, but then it always makes it difficult to then choose what you really want to do for a career. So in college, I didn't know what I wanted to major in. Ended up I loved everything. Ended up majoring in music. And I played the piano and I sang in the chorus and was sort of an amateur musician, but I loved it. And so I ended up becoming an elementary and junior high school and high school music teacher for 6 years until I was laid off after Prop 13 in '78, and then had to get into something else that I wanted to have a little more security than being a music teacher. And so my dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse, so I said to my mom, were nurses ever laid off in the Great Depression? Oh no, honey, they always need nurses. That's for me. So that was a tremendous career that I just retired from after 31 years. So my identity is sort of as a nurse teacher, and I have both in me that are reflected in my work at the City Council as a nurse trying to take care of the community, and as a teacher wanting to educate the community about issues and trying to find solutions and so forth. In growing up in Alameda, our friend, the Colishans, Franz Colishon ran for mayor, was the mayor, and my friend Nancy Godfrey's father ran for mayor, and he was the mayor. And it was that we were always stuffing envelopes or, things like that, having, mailing parties, and then one of their friends ran for assembly. And so, I didn't think anything of it, really, and didn't do anything with electoral politics until I moved to Capitola, actually, and got involved as a way to meet people. As a single person in 1972 here, what was going on? Well, it was community activities and elections and things like that. So it was it was a social scene, a way to meet people and have friends and do fun things, and you get connected with one group that's working on that issue, and then you get connected with another group, and pretty soon you know all these really, really interesting, amazing people. So we're in a very interesting time right now because we're about to elect the first woman president. So it is a very, very, very exciting time for especially those of us who have been elected to politics and are looking for higher leaders to lead us in this difficult time that we have. I was only the third woman to be elected to Capitola. The first was Ruth Gabrielson, who I never knew, and I don't really know her about her. And she served for 4 years. And then Karen Han Mudgett, served from '78 to '82, and she didn't run for re-election. And then I first ran in '84. And then I served the first 8 years just as the only woman on the board. And then Margaret Fabrizio was elected, and I served 4 years with her, and that was just a joy. And then she was re-elected, but 2 years later quit over a big issue, big problem. And I'm sorry she quit, because I said, you quit, they've won. We don't want them to win, but she left. And Gail Ortiz was appointed to the council by the members of the city council. In a very unusual process. Usually when you have a vacancy, Scotts Valley's had one, Santa Cruz has had them, Watson Mills probably had them. And when you have a vacancy, you advertise, you take applications, you review the applications, you have a list of questions, and you interview them, and the council presumably chooses the best applicant. Well, my council members didn't want to do that because probably too much work, too much trouble, or whatever. I had a copy of Scotts Valley's questions, because they were going through the same thing at the time. I said, we'll just change Scotts Valley to Capitola. We need to advertise, we need to have a public press. No, we have someone we want for the job. I said, can't do that, that's not a fair public process. Oh, well, we're just gonna do it. And by golly, they did. And Gail came to the meeting, and the motion was to appoint her. And I had called people to say, come to the meeting, we've got to have a process, we've got to have applications, it needs to at least look like it's a fair process. They can go ahead and appoint their friend, but at least you need to interview people and give the public nothing. So it was a motion and a second, and I thought, I can't vote against her. She was my treasurer in my first 2 campaigns. So it's one of the very few times I've ever abstained because I couldn't vote yes. It was a bad process. So anyway, but we had a good time serving together, and then she was on for 2 years, ran for re-election. And then since then, since 2010, no other women in the city council. And why do I bring this up? Why does it matter? Because in my experience, at least, women have such a different way of communicating, of dealing with each other, of problem solving, of listening to each other, working collaboratively. And I'm not a mother or a wife, but imagine it's what mothers and wives go through in being PTA leaders with their kids and their households. You have to prioritize, and you have to handle a million different things at the same time, and listen to the kid and do something about that, get ready for dinner, do the laundry, do all of these things. And they're just used to, I think, a different way of communicating and dealing with problems. It's not so cut and dry as it is with men often, because I think just the difference I think it's testosterone. Because definitely there's men who have a whole lot of testosterone, and you know who they are, what they sound like, and how they work, and how they act, and how they think. And when you got to work with people like that, it's difficult. You work with somebody who listens, collaborative, so that's at least been my experience. And so what we have not done a very good job in Capitola of mentoring younger women, and so that's what we're trying to do now, is to get more women involved in the process, because it just makes such a difference when you're making decisions about things. Years ago, I belonged to a group called the California Elected Women's Association, and we would go to Sacramento for a conference, and we would get together with the women's caucus up there, which were the assembly women and the senators, women senators, very many of them. And they would get together with us, and they talk about how they worked in Sacramento, and they said, we have come together to form this caucus to work on issues that the men either aren't interested in or very little interest, nothing's ever going to happen. So we've come together to try to get some bills passed that mostly dealt with child care or family issues. And they worked in a bipartisan way. It was very exciting. It was very good. I don't know if they're still doing that or not. But anyway, those are the kind of things that are really good to see happening around the state and regionally. And I think that it's been a wonderful experience to work with the other women in this community. There's some great leaders, some great mentors, and it's still a male-dominated political world out there, money-wise and otherwise, but we just have to keep plugging along to get more women elected in decision-making capacities, because it does make a difference. And thank you for having me today, and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I'm a bit humbled humbled by this crowd because everybody here has been politically active, so, and many friends here with many battles. It's nice to follow Stephanie. Actually, our relationship goes way back. I think we both came to Santa Cruz County about the same time, and when Stephanie ran for office the first time, you tell me if I've got this right or wrong, but you were involved in the Sierra Club, weren't you? And my parents were involved in the Sierra Club. My mother's a great DIY, silk screener. So was that when she silk screened your campaign signs? Yeah, so those of you who know my mother. That will all sound true. And our paths have continued to cross, and I think that has been one of the real pleasures of being in office and being a woman in office, is that we do make connections over time and work on common projects. Stephanie has been a real leader, which you didn't even mention, in the creation and then maturing of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. That was really a really important issue that you carried the torch for a long time, and it's something. I now sit on the Sanctuary Advisory Committee, but there again, that's a long interest in common that we've held, and more recently Stephanie's been a stalwart working on the library ballot measure, and particularly I think, and this is just local politics, the Capitola Library's been operating out of a couple of modular buildings for 16 years, and we're on the verge of seeing a legitimate building come to fruition there. So it's really been a joy to have our interests weave in and out, and build on those relationships. Just a little bit of background on myself. My family grew up engaged in community. Not really in politics so much, but in community. And my mother was the Girl Scout leader at one point for 3 troops at one time. You talk about, how the ways in which women contribute, and particularly, this was the 50s. It was a narrower spectrum of the ways that women contributed, but that was terrific. And I was just looking back on my experience and what we see as a need to develop these days. I was really lucky that I had a lot of opportunities as a team to take responsibility and be a volunteer and feel that my contributions mattered in some small way, and to have leadership opportunities. And I'm just very grateful for that. And as we get older, we see how important that is for young women coming up, teens, college age women, to get their feet wet and do something important and feel that satisfaction and sense of truly making a difference. We moved here in 1970, my husband and I and our family. He came to the university, and we came from San Diego, where I had been involved with Planned Parenthood there. And when we moved here, I was really involved in getting the local affiliate started, which is now part of the very large Planned Parenthood Mormonte, but started out as a volunteer effort, and some of you here, that's one of the things we have in common. And my work with Planned Parenthood was in the area of public affairs, so not in clinical services or education, but doing the lobbying, coalition building, communications, all that sort of thing. And what my work with Planned Parenthood taught me really early on is that not everyone's going to like what you do. And it's good training for politics, do you? And also that you have to be really clear on your values, because if you go out and start to do something and you get attacked and then start to feel bad and wondering, well, if you're pretty clear on where your values are, then it's easier to navigate that kind of public exposure. So that was good experience for my later experience. My early work, little kids at home, working part-time for Planned Parenthood, but I also had the opportunity to get involved in neighborhood issues. This was, we lived downtown, so just kind of garden variety, I think, neighborhood issues, but also in parks and schools. And there again, I think that's probably where our paths intersected in some of the open space preservation issues from that decade. And there again, what that, in retrospect, gave me was connections in quite a few different areas of endeavor, just creating relationships and what we today call networking, but, you know, wasn't thinking of it with that word. Subsequent to that, I was appointed to the Planning Commission, the city's Planning Commission, and that was really valuable as a step towards being on the city council, because land use is just so critical to local government. And there again, that gave me a good introduction to the issues, the trade-offs, the legal requirements, just all the different players. And kind of understanding when a developer comes and says, see, it's gonna look beautiful like this. And then it gets built and you think, huh. That's not what I was expecting, you know, so that was a good, good reality base. Then in 1989, of course, the Loma Prieta earthquake hit Santa Cruz. And I was one of the appointees to the 35-member group Vision Santa Cruz, which was charged with guiding a recovery plan for downtown Santa Cruz. And that was, for me, and I think for everyone on that group, a really significant experience in the life of the community for a couple of reasons. At that point, pretty much all differences were set aside, and there was one community goal, and that was to get the community back on its feet. And so, those of you who were around will remember that Vision Santa Cruz was appointed by the city council, and its representatives were very diverse. There were property owners, there were business owners, there were housing advocates, there were arts advocates, there were people from labor, there were people from private sector. The financial sector was there. I was appointed to represent historic preservation interests, and neighborhoods were represented. And I haven't even covered all bases, but public safety was on there. So kind of uncharacteristically for Santa Cruz, where particularly at that time, you kind of knew your own circle pretty well, but people at Vision Santa Cruz were all of a sudden having to work on a pretty intense schedule with people who hadn't even met before. So maybe you just had an image of what that person was like, or an image of what their frame of reference was. But all of a sudden you were part of a working committee with a clear, really, really important goal. So that Vision Santa Cruz process, we worked with some very good consultants, came up with a recovery plan for downtown Santa Cruz. But that, to me, was a really satisfying object lesson in how you take all these different interests and you find a place where they overlap and where everyone has something to contribute to the end goal. And it may be banks making local loans, it may be a developer making that decision, and for those of you who were around, it was a terrible time economically in terms of the financial industry. It was after the savings and loan debacle and banks were loaning, and we thought, oh, mixed use? That's strange, we don't want to loan on that. Something which today just sounds, of course we want mixed use. We want ground floor residential, ground floor commercial and residential, vibrant city, etc. But in those days, you know, the big banks wouldn't lend, so we had to depend on our local financial institutions to make some of those key early loans. And the housing advocates, you know, going out and finding, well, we can find some money from Red Cross, we can find some money from state, and just piecing it all together. It was really, as I say, kind of a changing point in terms of seeing the community in a different way and how to be effective. And at that time, my kids were out of the house. And, you know, I'll mention as we go on, what's different about being a woman in office? What are the challenges? I think everyone has to admit, one of the big challenges is work-life balance. And for me, I was busy with civic life, I was busy with family life, and working part-time. So for me, running for office, although I'd been interested for a while, it didn't seem realistic until my kids were no longer in the home. I wouldn't say on their own yet, but one of the questions we were asked was what talents or perspectives do we feel we bring to our job. I think one of the things, by the time I ran for office, and I was 50 at the time, so was a good broad network in the community from all these little things that I had done, not ever planning to put them all together, but I think that was an asset and remains an asset. And also, you know, the personality that I bring to it is pretty practical, pretty results oriented. And one thing that I do appreciate about, I think political work in general, life in general, whatever endeavor you work in, is acknowledging what different personalities and different skills bring to the mix. And I think our city council has been best when we do have just different primary interests, different personalities coming together, hopefully in a respectful way. But anyway, I think that's what I bring to it. We were also asked to just reflect on how's it different to be a woman in politics. And I would say, again, and I would almost say, what's it like to be a person in politics? It's really important to have a supportive family, friends network, because it can be demanding under any circumstances, time, psyche, whatever. And it's really important to have some wind at your back. And I do appreciate the fact that my entire extended family has always been tolerant of my late night meetings and scooting about from here to there, and really more than tolerant, just appreciate it, that's the way, that's the direction that my energy was going. But it's just really important, I think, to have that support network. In terms of what is different in politics for a woman, I think it's so hard to make generalizations. Stephanie and I talked a bit yesterday, and just Capitola and Santa Cruz, they're so different. And our experiences have been so different. So I think we can probably safely make some generalizations, but probably best to avoid them. But even so, I think one of the things for some women getting into it, and it depends on their community and the entity they're with, but just that Stephanie mentioned testosterone, maybe a tendency to be dominant in conversation, to be dominant in discussion, and not make space to hear the other viewpoints that may not be in the beginning quite so assertive. And I was interested to see, what's Barbara Boxer's new book title? Getting Tougher. I mean, it's something like that. You know, learning to be assertive when that's what's called for. In terms of the challenges faced by women politicians, again, I put work-life balance right up there at the top. And it just, you know, my husband's a workaholic. He loves his work. So that's great. He's not sitting at home saying, where is she? Because, you know, it's busy. And I think that, for me, that's one of the pleasures of local politics. I was talking with Joyce yesterday. I went to an event on campus in the morning, and then the Japanese Cultural Festival at noon, and then the Santa Cruz Film Festival at 2:30, and here, and then I'm going to Gay Pride, you know. And the thing is, that's what people like in their local electeds. They like people to be paying attention to their efforts, because we have a zillion great organizations, great activities, great causes, and you all know because you're involved in them. You want to feel someone's paying attention to what I'm doing, and they're acknowledging where this fits into the life of the community. So I think that's really important. I do know that that's one of the things that discourages some younger women from either running for office or running again for office. And certainly in the city of Santa Cruz, Hillary Bryant, who was a great city council member and mayor, after 1 year, she's got 2 little kids, kind of, older elementary, middle school age. And she said, I gave it my all, but I'm not gonna do it again maybe till they're older. Pamela Comstock has a kid, works full-time, husband travels a lot. It's a lot. That's a lot to juggle. One of the things that I've appreciated is that, and I'm just gonna reference this to women, is the women that I've worked with, they do take it seriously. They wanna do a good job, and you gotta respect that in someone. If I'm gonna do it at all, I wanna do it well. So, I do think that is one of the realistic obstacles. In terms of what can we do to get more women to participate in government, I think one of the things is really paying attention to entry-level opportunity and realize that people don't go 0 to 60. Very few of them do. But getting the feet wet and looking, even in the teen years, looking for opportunities to give girls meaningful opportunities for engaging in political life, in policy issues, and having leadership opportunities. Some of you know of the organization that Mary Hughes founded and works strongly with, called Close the Gap. They're looking a little bit higher office, but how can we do and it's not just the writing the check when the candidate's finally on the scene, it's cultivating and recruiting and encouraging and building a framework, and helping that candidate get into maybe an entry-level office and gaining the experience to work up. And there are other organizations like that provide just the, come to us, ask your dumb questions, find out the framework, what it means to run for office, and get the support. So those are really important efforts. I also want to talk about, when we talk about encouraging women in politics, it's not just elected office. It's also the public sector. And it's one of the things that I've really appreciated in the city of Santa Cruz is we have such good staff in the public sector. And I look just in our executive staff in the city of Santa Cruz, our planning director, economic development director, HR director, water director, library director, IT director, and assistant city manager are all women. And they are fantastic. So, and they're important. And I have to say, as an elected, I'm not an expert in water, I'm not an expert in economic development, I'm not an expert in planning, and I rely on all our staff. They're really good professionals. And of course, the electeds, have the hearings and learn and have a generalist view and make the ultimate decision, but we rely so much on the quality of our staff work. And that really is public service too. So we're always looking, and I think this is true of a lot of organizations. You think, we're aging out. How are we gonna replace ourselves? And going into public service is an important area, and we're so thrilled when we can get talent, younger talent in the city, and give them encouragement and a path to advancement. So it's one of the things we're looking at in the city, and of course this is men and women both, but it's important for women. What are the career paths so you will stay and develop and excel in public service, in the public sector? So I just think that's a really important niche. And finally, I'll just mention encouraging, and I'm going to say younger people, women and younger people, in being appointed to boards and commissions, and being very proactive. And again, that's something that I personally have paid attention to in the city. When we have vacancies on our commission, not just wait till a deadline and say, well, who turned in an application? but go out and look for people who have promise, encourage them to apply, really recruit. And I think that's how we get some of our better commission members. And, you know, maybe someday they'll run for public office, maybe not, but I consider that they are part of public policy when they're serving on a commission. And finally, I just want to mention, again, a conscious effort. Carol and I are on the Democratic Central Committee. Am I missing anyone else here who is? And those, of course, positions are elected by supervisorial district. But we've, not just us, but the Democratic Central Committee has made a real effort to look for younger people who can get that entry-level experience in local politics and campaigning and so forth, and just become part of the infrastructure and hopefully the pipeline to serve in elected office in the future. So I will just close on a note. On Thursday evening, my husband and I were up in the city at the San Francisco Silent Film Festival. And at the San Francisco Silent Film Festival, there was a premiere of a movie, a feature film that was filmed in Santa Cruz in 1917. Isn't that something? And the name of the film is Mothers of Men. And bear in mind, this was after women had the vote in California, but before they had the vote federally. And this is a feature film about a woman running for and being the governor of California. And the challenges that presented to her. And it premiered, it's just been restored. The only known copy, which was in England, has been restored. It was premiered in San Francisco. And we hope to bring it to Santa Cruz in the fall, so stay tuned. Anyway, things have changed. I think they've really changed for the better. I want to say personally in Santa Cruz, in the city of Santa Cruz and Santa Cruz community, I think it's been a very encouraging environment for women to run for office and to serve in office. So,
Well, thank you
That's
so
it.
much. Any questions?
and there's someone else who's served in public office here.
And I'm sure your experience was very different.
The same question. You've both been in office for quite a while, and I wonder how you look at it now differently, if at all, than when you started.
That's a good question.
Well, I never had any intention of running for office. I like to be in the background stuffing the envelopes and hanging out with all the worker bees. But in '84, I got my arm twisted. And then after 8 years, I retired because I thought there's another life out there. And then I got my arm 2 years later, got my arm twisted again, and that's happened a number of times. But I think we just need to help mentor other people, and that's the key, is to make it seem like an honorable profession, that they're honest people doing this work, that we're not doing it to be self-serving. We could be doing a lot of other important things, but we enjoy the work, and hopefully have learned to be effective. And so I think it's always a challenge, because most people don't like public speaking. They're afraid of public speaking. And I never was. When I was in the 3rd or 4th grade, they always made me be the announcer and the moderator for the programs at school. So, you know, that was, I still get nervous though, but I mean, most people don't like public speaking, and they don't want to sit through long, boring meetings. Have you, you know, how many of you watch community television and watch the Santa Cruz City Council meetings? Well, I do, or the Board of Supervisors meetings, because I'm, you know, and even Watsonville you can watch, and Capitola. You know, most people, they're just not interested. They have interest in their issues, but not in the whole process. So we have to make it, I think, attractive to people that it is a great job.
And yet, be realistic about what you're getting into. To your point, I think it's a lot more complicated now than it was when I started out. Certainly the budget constraints, you know, the evolution of California taxing possibilities, of the legal constraints, environmental reviews, just the scope of some of the issues. I mean, look at what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with water, we're dealing with transportation, we're dealing with housing and homeless. I mean, they're really really tough issues that no one little entity is gonna resolve. So, I think the progress on some things is slower, it's certainly more expensive than we can easily handle, and just in terms of, the city, I think both of our cities, the budget is your reality, that's it, and, you may have a lot on your wish list, but you have a budget that stares you in the face, and so having to really make those, choices of what you're gonna fund and how you can be effective doing it. So I think just the complexity, and the other thing I'll say too, in terms of demands, and I don't know if this is true for you, but the council members, in addition to going to a meeting every 2 weeks and trying to do a good job on that, we have lots of assignments, and they're huge. So many council members will have 10 different committee assignments. Maybe it's Area Agency on Aging, or LAFCO, or there's a committee on the FAA overflight patterns, there's committees on water basin management. I mean, and we need to be at the table of those, and there's 7 people. And so I think that's something that surprises some new council members is, oh, I understood about the meetings, but all these other assignments, and again, they want to do a good job. So I think that's a bit of a surprise too.
So social media and what the internet has done to change politics, because now you had time to, study different issues, but now you've got Take Back Santa Cruz, you got Neighborhood Watch, you got, everybody is watching you all the time, and whatever happens, there's a lot of communication going on between all these individuals. So how do you, that change is really phenomenal in politics today, so how do you feel your committees and the councils relate to that?
Well, it's not so much of an issue for us in Capitola as it is in Santa Cruz. We don't have activist groups in Capitola per se. It's such a small town, only 2.5 square miles and 10,000 people, and a lot of people know each other. And, there's a lot of new people in town, but we've been on television since the early 80s, I think, even the 70s. So people are used to turning us on. Channel 8, we have our own channel, that the television company keeps trying to take away from us. And you can watch the meetings, and we're close enough that people can hear something, they can run down to the meeting in their pajamas. They do it. And we hardly have people that ever come to our meetings, except if they have an item on the agenda. We don't have people that just come in our watchdogs and watch what we're doing. Years ago we did. We had some little old ladies from Depot Hill that would come down, and then they'd comment on things, and that's how I got started. I was part of the Depot Hill Neighborhood Association, and we used to go down there, and I remember saying to the council, you shouldn't be spending this money on a party for the employees, because I'm a school teacher and we don't spend the kids' money on a party for the faculty, so you shouldn't be spending the city money on a party for the employees. I remember saying that. Yeah, the article in the paper was, was Harlan, curmudgeon Harlan, council for spending money, and now now we have these lavish dinners, and I still complain, but it's a different time, different world. But anyway, you can address the social media.
Well, it's a blessing and a curse, and it is challenging, and we all know one of the nice things about social media is you find out about stuff you're interested in, but the curse part of it is so much of it is rumor, and rumor laced with inaccurate information and hysteria and snarkiness. And that is a really unpleasant environment to work in. When you know you're doing your best with the resources at hand, and it's maybe challenging, and you're trying to get to the goal, and then there's just it's wearing, and it's wearing, and again, I'll say, I think council members sign up for it. If you're running for public office, you figure, okay, target, but it's very demoralizing for our staff, quite honestly, when they're doing a good job. So, I would say the other thing, simultaneous with social media, has been a decline in traditional media, and we all know we no longer have a newspaper of record. And so it's really hard for, I think, any institution, but I'll just talk about local government, to get out any kind of depth on the issues that we're dealing with, that's read by a large number of people and kind of understood as a source to go. So that to us is a challenge. How do we tell our story? How do we get out? We now, as a city, of course, we have our website and blogs, and we have Facebook pages and all that other stuff. We've recently started doing a couple of other things, because I think there's no one strategy. We do TV, we do print media, but we've started holding meetings in different neighborhoods called City Hall to You, where council and staff just go out into the different parts of the city. We're just there, read presentations, but mostly a chance to learn about city services, resources, etc. And recently did one called State of the City, which was aimed more at business and community leaders. So we're trying a bunch of things to give both accurate and helpful information to the community, but it's definitely a challenge.
Well, that reminds me of talking about media. We used to have the Green Sheet. The Green Sheet was put out by the Register Poweronian. The Green Sheet was a mid-county newspaper, and it was green. And it was delivered to, I guess it was I think it was free, and it was delivered to all the households in Capitola. And they had a reporter, Bob Smith, and his wife was a librarian. And he did a good job, and we kind of called him the sixth council member, because that's what he thought he was. I should see his face when I was elected in '84. He was horrified, he couldn't believe it. And so he didn't write very good things about me for a long time. But anyway, it was good coverage. And then Mary Bryant of the Mid-County Post covered us extensively, sometimes too extensively. The articles were so long. They were too long. I don't think people wanted to read that much. But I mean, in-depth coverage of what we were going through with the big financial mess that we had when the city manager commingled redevelopment funds with city funds, and stuff was in the wrong names, and we bought stuff with the wrong money, and it was a big giant financial mess. So I mean, she covered that step by step to explain it to people what went on, and it was invaluable. It was absolutely invaluable. So that paper doesn't exist anymore. The Sentinel doesn't really cover us. How many of you read articles about Capitola in the Sentinel? No. Very rarely. Johnny used to.
They do.
Yeah.
Cynthia, I want to apologize for being late. I took a taxi from the mall, and the lady went to the golf course instead.
Oh.
So I apologize to you for being, but even though I'm so personally fond of both of you, the main thing that makes you strong leaders, you are two of the most clear thinking people. When I without looking, I could hear you, either of you analyze the issue, you do it concisely, factually, and both of you know how to move an agenda. Give everyone their say, but keep the agenda moving. You have two of those are really strong leadership skills that are gender neutral. And I think actually, besides you both being really gorgeous human beings, I think that's two of the reasons why you actually were elected and re-elected, those two real skills of leadership. Because whether somebody agreed or disagreed with you, they would know they would be getting the clear, straight facts to begin with, and as concisely and accurately as possible. And I think that's one of the things that you've proven why women can be good leaders. Because, as someone being your friend and hanging out with for coffee, which we've done that, but when it comes to doing business, you two do business. And I think that's
even
the great.
I'm from over the hill, southwest Santa Clara Valley, and we just had an old and new board meeting, and I live in Campbell, and we have a woman vice mayor for the first time practically ever. And she also served, I think she served 25 years on the planning commission before she ran for the city council. I was wondering how both of you have been on the planning commission. How does that inform what you do afterwards? I mean, does that bring, with her, it seems to bring a whole network of experiences and people. what is it with you?
Well, I started out when I was thinking about getting involved with the city council. I got our Capitola had a rent review board for mobile home parks. We have mobile home rent review, rent control, and we had a rent review board. So I learned all about that. And then I just started going to council meetings when I really decided I was serious about running for council. And then I took planning classes. There was a planning class that Joe Hall taught at Cabrillo College, beginning planning 101. And then I went to other planning classes so I could learn about it, because it's not something that lay people can just sort of read the zoning code and apply it. There's, you know, it's a profession and it's technical information. And one of the problems we have today are some people making decisions that don't have that technical background, and it's pretty obvious. You know, you can see it, listen to what they have to say about things.
Well, I alluded to in my comments, just gaining a familiarity with what planning is, both future planning and current planning. And I do know that some of the more recently elected council members who are great council members, but that's just not part of their experience. And they will tell you, even our strong new council members will say, oh, wow, first 2 years, I'm just getting my sea legs. I mean, and Cynthia Chase, who I really like, been in office for about 1.5 years, and she would lean over and say, you know, what's an EIR? I mean, that's just an example, but you know, there's jargon, there's assumptions, there's whole bodies of legal, you know, your state requirements for a housing element and all this stuff. And when you're brand new, that stuff is flying at you so fast. So I think it's a great piece to have in your background. It just gives you a much more thorough sense of context. And for those council members who come in without that, then clearly that's something that they're going to need to be get some training or some mentoring on.
Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
I really appreciated that summary about people who can be friends with you, and then when it's business,